Greetings, demons, and welcome to my look at the 26.30 or 26.2, depending on which version of the game you're playing, update for Minecraft, the Chaos Cubed update. And yeah, there isn't necessarily that much to be going over, but I do want to kind of discuss everything that we do have here. So let's go jump into it and check out Chaos Cubed.
Not the leader of a cult, RabbitWithAxe.
So, to start off, we have the new range of Cinnabar blocks. So this, along with Sulfur, which you will get to, are the two new block types introduced. And we do actually have quite a selection here. We have the regular Cinnabar, the natural Cinnabar, the polished Cinnabar, the Cinnabar bricks, and then also chiseled Cinnabar. And as for the first three, they all come in varieties of slab, stair, and wall, which I think is pretty good and also puts them in line with every other rock and rock adjacent type material we have in the game. But yeah, I honestly think this is a really nice colorway for a lot of these blocks. It's stuff that we don't necessarily have that much in this deep of a red. Obviously, you know, you do have stuff with a darker red, you know, with netherite, but for the most part, like, these are generally the most clean red bricks we have, and same really goes for this sort of like smooth stone effect. I guess the regular Cinnabar does have that kind of granite look to it, so if you're not really into that overall aesthetic, it's not that useful. But I think generally this is a really nice selection of blocks to use, and definitely it's going to be useful for building, especially some more European style buildings, like having red brick, like proper red brick, that isn't, you know, bricks, is definitely going to be beneficial for some architectural styles. And yeah, overall the Cinnabar chisel block as well, it has a nice little spider design on it. Nothing too interesting in the grand scheme, but definitely something different. And yeah, Cinnabar overall, pretty cool. Then moving on, we have Sulfur, which once again has a pretty decent variety here. We have the Sulfur regular, we have the polished Sulfur, Sulfur bricks, chiseled Sulfur, and then we also have potent Sulfur, which we will get into exactly what that means in a moment. But yeah, once again, just like with the well, that's not meant to click. Just like with the Cinnabar, we also have varieties of slab, stair, and wall when it comes to all the sulfur blocks. And yeah, in general, I think that once again, these are a pretty nice breakaway from a lot of the other colors that we have in terms of stone material. And yeah, I think once again, this is going to be very useful for various types of building, which at the end of the day is the main reason to have different kind of blocks that are, you know, decorative in this way. When it comes to the chiseled variety, you actually do get a sulfur cube design, or kind of just a slime in general design, which I think is kind of cool. But yeah, overall, very simple design once again. Not overly useful. I feel like the spider one can fit in a little bit better with the Cinnabar, but when it comes to the sulfur one, it is a little bit too specifically a face, I think. And then we also have the potent sulfur, which, how that works is if it's underwater, it gives you an effect, and that effect, of course, being nausea, so I won't sit in it for too long. But yeah, it does also create a nice particle effect, which is something a little bit unique. And then finally, something that wasn't in the shulker box, we do have sulfur spikes, and these work exactly the same as the stalagmites that we've had in the past, except for they don't actually drip liquid. So unlike with regular spikes, where if you put water or lava above a downward facing one, it will drip, and you can use that to generate infinite lava or water into a cauldron. Unfortunately, with these ones, it doesn't appear to work that way, at least through my experimentation and through reading the wiki article, it doesn't appear to work that way. But either way, you still do have the same overall design and overall, like, use. They do do a little bit of damage when you fall onto them or when you jump into them, so they are definitely functional still in the same way that regular spikes are. They just don't have the full selection of abilities, which is kind of a shame, but is okay overall. And then we also have our music disc here, which I realized I don't think I have one in the music, so give me a second. But yeah, for this update, we actually got a number of new music tracks by Fingerspit, and yeah, this is Bounce, which is the one music disc that's been created. All the rest are for just general, you know, music that plays when you're playing, so we'll play through this for a bit. And overall, I think it's a nice atmospheric track. It's something we don't necessarily have too many of, and especially a lot of our more recent tracks have been a bit more poppy, so having something that's a little bit low-key, a little bit more, you know, basic, kind of brings me back to C418, and that kind of music. So it is definitely interesting to hear something a little bit more, chill, a little bit more lo-fi. But I definitely do like that. And that brings us to the final part of this update, which is probably the most important, that being the actual Sulfur Cube mob. And as you can see, they function very similarly to a standard slime, and obviously this is the spawn egg. Spawn as many of those as you want. If you do damage them, they do split off, only once though, into two. And when they are small, they can't actually be used in any real way, so we'll get into how they actually work in a moment. But you may also notice I have a bucket of Sulfur Cube, because in fact you can actually pick them up into a bucket. I will grab a regular bucket just to show that, but yeah, if you want, you can pick them up in a bucket and then place them back down again, which is a fun little mechanic. I don't really see how useful it's going to be in the grand scheme, but definitely something to keep in mind if you are wanting to utilize them for some element of your survival world. Because how they actually work, if I put all of these away, I'll keep the eggs on me for now, is if you give them a block, so in this case I have TNT and glowstone, and I'll grab lava just for future, you can actually just feed it, and they become that block. This also makes them completely immobile. You can push them around, and they will move with different kind of reactions and stuff, depending on what block you feed them. So if I feed one glowstone, same thing happens, they become stationary, they can be pushed around as much as you want, but you will notice the TNT is a little bit faster than the glowstone. The glowstone is a bit more difficult to move, and unfortunately, with both of these, if I was to hit them, other than the fact that they do bounce around, which is funny enough in itself, and once again showing just how they work differently depending on what material you feed them, I cannot kill them. No matter what I do, I will not be able to kill this Sulfur Cube. There we go, I managed to bounce it over there. And that is purely because of how they work. You cannot kill them once they have been fed a block. You can't get that block back either, unfortunately. However, the way to deal with this situation is, unfortunately, burning them. And that is unfortunately the only actual way to get rid of Sulfur Cubes once they have eaten a block. At least based on, once again, my own time spent with them as well as the wiki. And yeah, it's a very questionable thing, because it does mean that essentially you have this entity block that cannot die, cannot be destroyed in any normal way at least. It can be suffocated like any entity, and obviously I can kill it with fire or lava. But yeah, once you have, turned it into this, it's just an item. It's just a entity that you can hit around, and that's really it. It slides around, you can hit it with whatever, you can hit it with... I'm currently hitting it with not knockback, just a netherite sword though. But yeah, you can just knock it around and it'll just move. And, it's kind of fun in a way, but also not overly useful in my opinion. But that is how they work. And if we actually, seems I've grabbed a dirt block, a grass block, it does work with all blocks, and they all work slightly differently in terms of how they move and stuff. But for the most part, they are all functionally the same. And beyond, potential for mini-games and, creative and stuff, I don't really know why these exist. If I'm being honest, there's not really much functionality to them for survival players. And, yeah, beyond that, they're just not really all that interesting as mobs. They work very similarly to a regular slime. I will say, and I don't think we'll be able to actually get it to happen, but they will actually grow up over time from a small... So if you have one of these smaller cubes, they will eventually grow up, and in fact, does this already contain a grass block? I wasn't aware that's how that worked, if that is how it worked. In my testing, I haven't actually allowed one that had a block in it to grow up. But either way, they will eventually become full-size Sulfur Cubes. They do grow up eventually. I just don't think I'm going to be able to capture that on video this time around. But, yeah, that is everything in Chaos Cubed. This is a very weird, update overall, very weird drop. It adds some good stuff. You do have the music disc, which is always a nice thing to get. You have some weird functionality in terms of how the what's it called? The potent sulfur actually works with water, and the fact that we do have spikes that don't drip anymore is also very interesting. But a lot of this just comes down to cosmetic blocks, which I don't really mind. I do think that's always a good thing to have. It's always good to have some new blocks to, build with. And as I say, the red brick, especially the Cinnabar bricks, are definitely going to be useful for, building wider variety of different countries' architecture and stuff. But yeah, for the most part, I think this is a very kind of mediocre drop. There's not really too much on offer here if you don't want to play around with the functionality of the sulfur cubes themselves. And there are geysers and other natural structures that you can actually come across in a standard survival world that unfortunately I just can't show for this video. But yeah, overall, very kind of underwhelming in terms of the content we're actually getting, especially after Mounts of Mayhem, which is the previous one that I've done a full video on. That had a lot of good functionality that I've actually been able to use already within my survival world. This, I don't really see. I'm not really going to use any of it. Though I did say a lot of the same stuff about the Copper Age, so potentially I could find a good use for any of these features. But as it stands right now, there's not really too much on offer here. So with that being said, that is going to be it for this video. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like it, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss upload. Others, comment below your thoughts and feelings on 26.30 or 26.2, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Look at the screen, you'll be fine. Culture's a disease, but we'll survive. I just wanna take